what I'm seeing in the hiring market today is that a lot of folks pattern match. They want someone with a community background, they wanted someone in DevRel, et cetera. That may not, those folks are going to be great, but they're really hard to find. And believe me, everyone's messaging them. Sometimes the best community managers, the best developer relations folks actually come out of your existing community. They're developers who are really excited about the product. They're people who are already on your Slack channel. They're people who are already contributing to your code base. And they turn out to be really strong folks. And some of the best that I've met in the business have really started out that way. So my advice to founders, advice to folks who are hiring for community managers or people to manage your community is look beyond the background and look at the passion and look at the capabilities. So if it's a really extroverted person who already understands your code or who already understands your product, you should really give them a shot.
Hey everyone, I'm Joel Premack, host of the Community-Led Growth Show. Today I'm joined by Sam Richard, VP on the growth team at OpenView. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me, Joel.
Of course. Let's start off with a quick, easy question around your background. So would you please give all of our listeners a quick 30-second intro about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So going all the way back, I started my career in consulting and then got a little bored with that because it was defense work and it was very slow going. So I actually joined a B2C marketing agency, really enjoyed that work. And then from there, I went to startups. And being in Boston, most of the startups that I've joined have been B2B. Prior to working at OpenView, I actually was on the founding team of a company called Dispatch. I came on as their head of marketing, but I quickly learned that marketing touched a lot of different things. So I started to own customer success, onboarding, trying to get the product to onboard service providers. So imagine plumbers, electricians, et cetera, much more quickly. So ended up being the most annoying person at work and owning a lot of different things like product sales, customer success, et cetera. Ultimately, I worked there for 4 years and we sold the company to Vista Equity Partners. And that's when I learned what I was doing was called product-led growth. And OpenView, actually, fun fact, they coined that term. They're trying to make it happen. It's happening. So I joined the firm in 2019. OpenView is really interesting in that we are not just a VC firm. We also have a platform for folks who work at OpenView to be specialists and go to market and to really help our portfolio companies. So I went from practicing go to market at a startup to helping startups learn how to do go to market well. We find that at the stage at which we invest, a lot of these companies really need to learn to scale go to market and build this repeatable function. So it's really exciting work. And, I get to specialize in product-led growth at the product-led firm. So there's really not that much to complain about, Joel.
I'm glad to hear. And that all sounds very awesome and exciting. And I did not know that y'all coined the term product-led growth. Fun fact.
Yeah, all the way back right when we had made our investments in Datadog and Calendly. So we were thinking, what is really special about these companies? And we decided they were called product-led.
I love it. That's very fun history. Sorry, I'm a little B2B nerd. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I didn't know this. Well, in your role on the growth team at OpenView, you're speaking to portfolio companies about go-to-market strategies. Is community becoming more of a regular topic when you're talking about just like business strategies with these portfolio companies?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all sort of felt the crunch of, what it's like to actually do advertising on a paid basis and how difficult those channels have become and how low the returns of those channels have become. So it's not just product-led businesses like Calendly, like Comet, like Cypress that are turning to community. It's also companies that are typically sales-led. So like an NCamp, which is in our portfolio, or Pursuit, which is in our portfolio. These companies have really, they're taking what they believe are the best from product-led businesses, and most product-led businesses do have this really strong community function. So I'm seeing, traditionally sales-led or very enterprise-focused organizations really aspire to have a strong community as well.
Awesome. And so as you're seeing this, what are the goals that they're actually trying to achieve by launching a community? Because there are so many different types of communities and they can all impact an organization in so many different ways.
Hmm. My understanding of these companies that are turning away from necessarily, or not turning away from a sales-led model, but wanting to augment their sales-led model with community, is that they really want to empower their existing customers, their existing evangelists, the folks who are finding a ton of value from their product, but who've had sort of heavy lifts in terms of how they've been onboarded, in terms of how they've been sold. And they really want to amplify those folks, make them thought leaders, make them trusted leaders in this space, so that eventually when the conversation turns around to tooling or to platform, they're going to mention that vendor and they're going to be empowered by that vendor's community.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So you just mentioned really around this idea of customers, raving fans, to steal the phrase that Gong uses to describe their community of people. So what are some ways that people are kind of going from this idea to an MVP of community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always like to recommend a crawl, walk, run approach with anything that I'm introducing to a portfolio company or even a prospect. I think that people see community and they get really anxious. They see sort of like the GitHub model where there's just folks unboxing swag on YouTube, or they have this raving online community with thousands and thousands of users, and they see it as a Mount Everest that they just cannot get across. One suggestion I always have for companies who are new to community is, first of all, to hire someone to manage it. When everyone's managing something, no one is managing something. But second of all, it's really to take a city by city approach. I think we're back to events, we're back to in person. At least that's what I'm hearing on the ground. And I always recommend, going after 3 to 4 cities in that first year and putting together dinners or events, including folks that are existing customers but are also potential prospects, and making sure that they're meeting one another and they're empowered to do networking, and you're just the platform that's doing that. So making sure they're not necessarily super salesy meetings, but you're just the platform, you're paying the bar tab, etc., so that these people can meet up and exchange ideas and start networking.
I love that idea. And I think it's so smart if you build that kind of model of, per se, localization early, because then it allows you to do much more, I'll say, wild and engaging things down the road. Hopefully, as your community grows, crossing fingers, it does grow, of course.
Well, and one thing that people always ask is, how do you show the ROI of community? And when you take this city by city approach, it's really straightforward in terms of measuring it as well.
We are going to dive into this later.
Yeah.
Because I'm now very curious on that model, because I've had so many conversations with people around different ways that they measure it. And it really just ties back to what's the business goal that they're trying to have community impact.
Right.
But especially in this case of engaging customers and or prospect customers, then I'm very curious in your model of this. So we are coming back to this for sure, but we are going to go down a little bit of a different path right now. So there are a plethora of community or different types of communities. There's developer communities, there's customer, audience specific ones, etc. In your experience, how have you seen companies launch these different types of communities very well as from your own experience of being an operator before your time at OpenView as well?
I mean, I must say, in my experience as an operator, especially as a head of growth, there's not a ton of community for those folks, maybe because they're always heads down putting out fires. I'm seeing more and more communities spring up, but when I was an operator, I wasn't seeing a ton of them. So that was unfortunate. However, what I'm seeing now is that, developers, I think, are I call them like the OG for a lot of different things, specifically open source tooling. And they really sort of piloted community. They really focused on the end user. They really focused on developer, and they really focused on education. So when I'm looking at developer tools, I think that the focus on community really needs to be on education and making developers stronger coders from day one. And I think that those are really the most successful communities. In non-developer tooling, I like to see, ICP specific, ideal customer profile specific communities that, start small and always involve a customer or two. It's very strange when you're trying to develop community and amplify your brand and amplify the value that you bring to a specific ideal customer profile, and you don't have existing customers in the conversation. So, having those customers who are evangelists, who get it, to me is really a key to building a community around a product that's not necessarily developer focused.
I would agree. And I think that those people or companies that launch communities without talking to their customers or target audience for them are going to go what I call a community correction, essentially a market correction, but where they realize they didn't really launch what the market wanted. And therefore they have to relaunch and go back to work, really.
Right.
So very cool. On, excuse me, the path of launching a community, we've talked about a handful of different types of communities that companies can have. Do you have any words of wisdom for companies that are talking or thinking about launching their own community, and like either pitfalls to avoid or things to like just throw cash on, for lack of a better word, and watch it explode?
Yeah, I'll give a two-tiered approach, two-pronged approach. So the first is talent. The first is just, what I'm seeing in the hiring market today is that a lot of folks pattern match. They want someone with a community background, they wanted someone in DevRel, et cetera. That may not, those folks are going to be great, but they're really hard to find. And believe me, everyone's messaging them. Sometimes the best community managers, the best developer relations folks actually come out of your existing community. They're developers who are really excited about the product. They're people who are already on your Slack channel. They're people who are already contributing to your code base. And they turn out to be really strong folks. And some of the best that I've met in business have really started out that way. So my advice to founders, advice to folks who are hiring for community managers or people to manage your community is look beyond the background and look at the passion and look at the capabilities. So if it's a really extroverted person who already understands your code or who already understands your product, you should really give them a shot. And the second is really around operations and execution. Give yourself more than a quarter. Founders tend to have really shiny thing syndrome. And they get excited about community, and then it's not showing ROI directly, and it's not showing, any sort of lift in that first quarter, and people get frustrated and they abandon it. Well, that's not very fair to the person that you hired. It's also not very fair to the community, because it takes people time to understand things and to really start to add lift and to derive value from something. We're living in an asynchronous world where these communications are valuable, but they're a little bit slower. So, I would say, give it a year before you decide that community is not for you, and staff it. As I mentioned before, if everyone owns it, no one owns it. Make sure you're staffing it and make sure you're empowering that person as well.
I love all of those. Excuse me. Those are great lessons and points to share, because those are things that I've heard so many times over and over in different ways during my conversations with people for the show. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Now we are going to circle back to ROI and your and your model of showing ROI for communities that are localized, and how you kind of do it from A to Z, I guess. Let's dive in.
I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm original here, but I've, in my early days of my career, I actually, I had a pretty open door with the team at Uber here in Boston, and how they were launching in Boston. And, they started with a small squad. They started with a leader, then they had a squad, and they really sort of saw it as like a ninja growth mission. And that was actually how Uber took over. They did it city by city, and that's still sort of how they launched internationally today. I would say take a page out of that book, see yourself as an Uber in a Boston, and really say, okay, how can we adjust our mission and our goals for this city in this particular flavor? I mean, they would have different promotions in Boston versus New York, et cetera. They did not take this global approach. Every single team had its own sort of budget and ability to be flexible given what was going on in the city at that time. And that's really how they took over and how they grew. And now they don't have a Boston office. They have like a New England office. So eventually that does shift, but for a while you have to be really reactive to your community and what's going on. And then from there, you really say, okay, this city, we have folks on the ground, or we've had events on the ground, we have evangelists there. How are they growing differently to a similar size city where we have some customers? So maybe you'd compare like Boston to Houston or something like that, where you have this, if you know your ICP, you sort of know your total addressable market size. What's our penetration in the city where we have a community versus the city where we do not? And to me, that's a really good way to show ROI, even if it's a little bit complicated. That's a really nice summer project for an intern or an MBA.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it's
No,
also nice to augment that if you have a marketing team with some sort of like paid marketing, advertising, the things that are more challenging to actually show ROI on, like billboards, et cetera. That's always an interesting approach as well, but may not necessarily work with your brand.
very fair. I think that's a good point about talking about things that kind of fit with your brand too in community. There's that aspect of like, you can't do something so off brand just because it's different that then someone is like, what is going on over there? Like, love you, but what also is going on? We have questions now, kind of thing. So there's definitely that nice like relationship of being different but still being on brand as well. So I like that point. Awesome. Last question is, what are 3 community trends that you're hearing from portfolio companies or you're seeing at the more high level of being on the growth team at OpenView that you're expecting to happen in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, the first that I'm seeing is really sort of community overload and trying to be creative at how you define and develop community. I think trying to own the real estate on which your community lives is going out of vogue. Like trying to create a Slack channel and manage it is great if you have those resources, but also just owning, a list of folks and having that newsletter and having an open dialogue with them can also be community in a way. And having a manager who talks to people in different ways and doesn't necessarily own this real estate, own this website or something like that, because people get fatigued. They live their lives online, but they're like, I, for example, belong to 10 Slack channels and I cannot possibly participate in all of them. Same goes with Discord, et cetera. So, thinking about creative ways to develop community without necessarily owning the real estate on which people speak. The second that I'm seeing, which I'm really excited about, is that events are back. In-person is back. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, but I'm really excited about that after 2 years of not participating in those things. And then finally, the third that I'm really seeing is an expansion within community and the expansion of folks who are wanting to take that to the next level and actually want to talk to their users and want to talk to customers. So I think that there's going to be a lot of creative solutions for that. And I'm really excited to start seeing it. And Joel, I could really trust that you're going to be reporting on that live as well.
I definitely will. I'll get a little booth somewhere and start hopping around cities.
Yeah, I want to hear a complete episode about TikTok communities, given businesses. I'm really loving Ironclad. They have a really great TikTok community.
Okay. I only know one company that B2B company that uses TikTok, but they use it really for hiring.
Okay.
That's their take of their ICP is 50-50 kind of on it. But in terms of hiring, they can be fun, engaging, do things that are different, that are just connect one-on-one. So they found success with that, which I think is a huge opportunity. But I don't know a company that really does it for business, I guess.
Yeah.
But now I'm seeing it.
I'm seeing them come on LinkedIn. Yeah. Okay. Ironclad does a great job. Alex Su, he and I talk a lot on LinkedIn. He's a pro.
I'm gonna have to get him on the show now.
Yeah. Happy to make that intro.
More notes.
He was great.
Thank you very much, Sam. Sam, again, thank you so much for being on the Community-Led Growth Show today. If people want to follow or connect with you on other channels and or handles, what are the best for them to use?
Honestly, LinkedIn is the best, but I am kind of active on Twitter as a watcher of things. So either of those is great. Also, you can just directly email. It's easy. It's sam@ov.vc.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Yeah, great. Thank you.